Hello and welcome to Business Incorporated. Many thanks for joining us. I am Bolaji Akinwale. This week on the program, we'll be taking a look at revenue generation in the country. This comes on the back of dwindling crude oil prices in the international markets, where a barrel of crude has slipped from $114 to $84 in recent weeks. The concern now is the options available for the country should the price continue to slide. Our guest is the chairman of the Lagos Internal Revenue Service, Tunde Fowler.
So the drop in allocation to states does not directly impact the IGR.
On our headlines, Nigeria's position on the ease of doing business index drops. The World Bank has ranked Nigeria 170th among 189 countries in terms of the ease of doing business. In a report released recently, Singapore emerged the best country in the world to do business, while Mauritius was the best in Africa, with a ranking of 28. Nigeria's ranking for 2015 is slightly better than that of 2014, which placed the country in the 175th position out of 189 countries that were surveyed. The annual World Bank Group Doing Business report analyzes regulations that apply to an economist's businesses during the life cycle, including startup and operations, trading across borders, paying taxes, and resolving insolvency. The aggregate ease of doing business rankings are based on the distance to frontier scores for 10 topics and covers 189 economies. The bank, however, warned that the report did not measure all aspects of the business environment that matters to firms and investors. For example, it does not measure the quality of fiscal management, other aspects of macroeconomic stability, the level of skills in the labor force, or the resilience of financial systems. Its findings have stimulated policy debates worldwide and enable a growing body of research on how firm-level regulation relates to economic outcomes across economies. This year's report marks the 12th edition of the Global Doing Business Report series. This year, for the first time, the Doing Business Report analyzed business regulations in Kano as well as Lagos states. Nigeria is one of 11 economies with a population of more than 100 million, where the report now covers 2 cities, providing new insights into the variability of business regulation within economies. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has expressed concern over the government's need to improve non-oil revenue performances in the light of declining prices of crude oil in the international markets. The FCCI, at its third quarter press briefing on the state of the economy, noted that the idea of giving targets to revenue-generating agencies could result in some unintended consequences. The federal government had last week said it had raised the revenue targets of the Nigeria Customs Service and the Federal Inland Revenue Service in order to make more money available in view of dwindling crude oil revenue. According to the Chamber, there is a risk that best practice principles will be compromised by the agencies in the desperation to meet set targets. The president of the Chamber, Mr. Bello, stated that there were already negative manifestations in the manner of import valuation by the Nigeria Customs Service. It said reports reaching the Chamber indicate many instances of upward review of values of imports in complete disregard to the values of invoices of such imports. Importers have been made to pay import duty and other charges that are far beyond what they ordinarily should have paid. Many investors have suffered untold hardship as a result of this practice, especially when there is no effective dispute resolution system in place. Mr. Bello described the current scenario of sliding oil prices as significant and alarming, having dropped from $114 per barrel in June to $85 earlier in the week. For some time now, the amount generated by the federal government has dropped, no thanks to falling oil prices. There are plans to raise revenue targets for revenue collecting agencies like the Nigeria Customs Service. In this interview with Tunde Fowler, the country needs to look inward while Nigerians are enjoined to pay their taxes regularly. Thank you, Mr. Tunde Fowler, for your time with us. First of all, I'd like you to comment on the state of revenue generation in Nigeria.
Well, basically, all three tiers of government has been relying on oil sales. And if you notice, in the past reports being given by the Minister of Finance, there have been complaints about dwindling oil revenues, and that has affected all tiers of governments immediately, meaning that the monthly allocation has seen considerable declines. And it's come to a point whereby the federal government and state governments know they have to look at alternative sources of revenue, mainly internally generated revenue.
How is the development affecting allocation to the states?
Well, in terms of the allocation they get from the center, it has no direct impact because as of now, they have not readjusted the distribution program. And regardless of what you generate internally, it's for the internal use of the states or the federal government, as the case may be. And so the drop in allocation to a state does not directly impact the IGR. A state can have a high IGR, but that also doesn't impact the amount of revenue they get from the monthly allocation either.
What options should the country explore to be able to increase its revenues?
Well, mainly they have to look internally. It's the same option that all developed countries of the world have gone by, and that's by taxing their organizations and people who earn a living. Taxation basically is just taking a bit of the income or profit generated by a company to ensure that the society in which it operates or where you live has enough funds for the government to provide required services. And it's time that Africa as a whole, and Nigeria precisely, has to adopt that measure and make sure that government is adequately funded to provide services.
And now to the states, what do you think that they should do to fund the revenue shortfall that they may be having at the moment?
Well, basically, let's look at Lagos. 1999, the average revenue was 600 million naira per month. As of last year, the average revenue was 20 billion per month from internally generated revenue. Now the laws changed, and the change that we had in the laws was a reduction from the high rate of 25% to 24%. But then Lagos State has been able to increase its budget from 1999 from a budget of 17 billion to a budget of close to 500 billion as of last year. And that's because there are additional revenues. Now, if you look at what Lagos State receives on a monthly basis from the Federation account, including VAT and all incomes, it averages about 8 billion. Now, what we generate averages about 20 billion. So if we relied on the federal allocation of 8 billion, and we currently have a wage bill of 6 billion, now, anytime there's a reduction in oil sales, it has an immediate impact on what the states get, because the federal governments, states, and local governments share the revenue that goes into the Federation account. So if there's a drop in that 8 billion could drop to 6 billion. And a lot of states found themselves in that situation whereby they relied on federal allocations up to 90% of all the expenditure. Lagos State right now, 70% of our expenditure is from internally generated revenue. So we rely on federal allocation to the tune of maybe 30%. So a lot of states, including the federal government, are dancing on very thin lines. We're talking about the problem of unrest that we have currently, and the federal government wanted to borrow $1 billion. We're talking about Ebola, and some states require funding. Now, without any fallback position and not being able to predict what may come in the near future, both the federal government, state governments, and local governments should have a buffer. They should have another source of revenue apart from what is divided on a monthly basis from oil sales mainly.
When we look at the state in general and what Lagos is doing, how is Lagos State able to increase its tax?
So let me first of all let people know that we operate a federal law, meaning that the taxes that are generated within Lagos are the same taxes that are due in all other states of the Federation. the rates are also the same. So what we charge in Lagos are the same taxes that will be charged in Ogun State, charged in Kano State, charged in Zamfara State. It's a matter of making the organizations, the corporate society, individuals understand that there is a law. Secondly, let them understand and realize that without revenue, governments, whether at the federal level or the state level, cannot provide services, cannot provide a conducive environment for business. Without business, you don't have employment. Without security, you have no business. And those are the key things that governments have to provide. They have to provide infrastructure, they have to provide security, they have to provide services, be it healthcare, education for the needy, and all these require funding.
What do you think that other states should also do to be able to increase the level of revenue generation?
Well, I'm a member of the Joint Tax Board, and we just had a meeting recently in Delta State, and a lot of them are trying their best. Be it though that they started a bit late, but they all realize that they have no option. Delta State, they had a slogan, and it's, if I remember right, it says Delta after oil, something of that nature. Beyond oil, exactly. So they're not relying on what they're receiving from oil. They know eventually to provide all the services that the people require. They require funding, and they can't rely on oil. And that goes for all states of the Federation, including the federal government.